it, Levi.
This guy totally go insane. But it hurts someone.
I didn't get diagnosed with complex PTSD until I was in my late 30s, and up until that point, I grew up believing that I was haunted. It was terrifying. Sometimes when I'd have these dreams, I would just know that I was going to wake up and there was going to be something in the room with me. Something. Jack, I'm here because you're scared, and we need to talk about why. Hell, I'm scared too. You've been at this a long time, both the work as well as the avoidance.
This is just an experiment for a movie I've been making.
Do you know what that's called? Storytelling, stupid.
Stop it, okay? No!
Demons are real.
How do you know all this stuff anyway? Read a book sometime.
Over the years, I produced this anthology of short films alongside writing The Midnight Sun. If I can get back to those memories, maybe I can finally let them go.
Look at me.
You've spent all these years stuck in the past instead of letting it go and living your life.
In The Midnight Sun, Monster Jack travels back to confront trauma in childhood. Haunted by the ramifications of CPTSD, Monster grapples with the impacts of adverse childhood experiences, enraged by his inability to wake up young Jack to recognize the mortal cost of keeping his family's secrets.
And this you got to turn a tape off for. Nobody knows this, not my brother, not my siblings, nobody.
There are parts of my book that, I'm apprehensive, I guess, about finally sharing. There is a certain amount of disassociation that happens. When you're writing, it feels even more safe than being in a counselor's office because there's literally no one there to judge. It's just you and, your computer and, and the shadows in the room, right? That's weird. Why did I say that? Okay, so, it feels safe because, it's just you, sort of. But sometimes even just being you sitting in that chair, waiting for that blinking cursor to turn into some words that have some significance can be so daunting, right? Because we're sometimes our worst critics and we're judging ourselves. And so I kind of, would go into a pact with myself where I would try to let go of that and I would try to turn to that anger that I pushed down when I was a child and say, this is it. This is your safe place. Let's feed the monster and let's let some of this out.
I was so sure back then. A strange kind of confidence when nothing else matters.
In my novel, The Midnight Sun, that angry adult perspective is sort of manifested into this character voice of Monster Jack, who's sort of an unreliable narrator, but an informed narrator, going back to the times when he wasn't informed on these very serious conditions that were influencing his path and sort of descent. Sometimes, I'd read things that I'd have a hard time admitting to myself in the, walking light of the day, but in that state of writing, letting Monster Jack out onto the page, letting that voice go back and express itself, that was a really powerful outlet. But it's also scary, because when you come back out of that sort of disassociation, when you're in the outpouring process and you go, yeah, this feels empowering to let it out, but the thought of my friends and my family and even people I just see on the street, right, learning these things about me, it's the kind of stuff you spend your life hiding and living in denial about.
I feel like I'm waking up from some manic dream.
I think the thing that's held me back the most in bringing the Midnight Sun to fruition is battling a sense of shame, which I've read isn't uncommon for people who've survived high ACEs and who are going through complex PTSD. Toxic shame is something that a lot of us carry. And for me, I think there was shame from the secrets that I kept growing up, as well as how they impacted me. And then there's the struggle with shame in opening up to talk about them, because, for me, I couldn't talk about these things for most of my life. To honor certain people who I loved and who I felt I needed to protect, even though it was their job to protect me. And out of respect for them, because even though on paper I suppose they might be considered my primary abuser, I still love them very much and did my best as a young person to try to take care of them.
I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too. That's why I sacrificed my whole fucking life.
I know you fucking regret a lot of stuff, man, but I just fucking love you for who you are, Dad.
I am who I show you. Trust me, I know the wicked person I am.
When I first started writing The Midnight Sun, I was a teenager, really, and some in my early 20s, and those were largely little journal entries here and there. I'd have a lot of false starts because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to take an honest look at what my story was, despite having this urge and need to express it. When I got serious about writing, and later in my 20s, certainly the first versions were, a lot closer to that initial story I wanted to tell myself as a young person, back when I still held a lot of these characters, the inspiration for these characters on a pedestal, before I had come to terms with the negative impacts they had on my life and the kind of path that they sometimes led. It took a lot of work to look at some of that early writing and, kind of come to grips with, well, this isn't really me. This is some version of me that I'd present to people, sort of the mask I would wear, and sort of the insulator I created for myself in the story that I told myself to protect me from my own narcissistic injuries, I guess, meaning, bruises to the ego, and looking at that you're not always the hero, that you've done things that you are ashamed of, the people you love have done things that, they are ashamed of, you are ashamed of, and you question, your part in enabling some of those things by keeping their silence because of love. Because of respect, and I suppose to a certain extent because of fear.
It has been discovered by scientists that early abuse and neglect in a child's life can lead to abnormal brain development. The main areas affected by this abnormal brain development are the areas of the impulse control. This means that a child will grow up to be overly aggressive and impulse violent. Even if a child doesn't grow up to have an abnormal psychopathic tendency, he'll at least have a low confidence and a bad attitude towards things.
Something inspired me when I was young. Something happened that made me feel that I was so lost. I was kind of hopeless, so I might as well sort of sacrifice my humility to, explore what the hell is wrong with me. And that's kind of sad looking back, that, somebody who's 16, 17, would feel that way about themselves.
My name's Levi Taylor. I'm 17 years old. Today is my birthday party. It's Blink 182. I got the shit kicked out of me. No one really cares. I'm all alone.
I took this video after seeing Blink 182 perform at the Egan Center in Anchorage during their Poo Poo Pee Pee tour of 1998. They were one of my favorite bands in high school, and I had been looking forward to the concert for months to celebrate my 17th birthday. It's not very often that headliners like Blink 182 come to a place like Anchorage, Alaska, so it was a pretty big deal, and really, it was an incredible time. Until suddenly, without any fucking warning, I was grabbed from behind and held down by several men as... This is hard to read. I was grabbed from behind and held down by several men as their friends took their turns kicking me all over.
Next thing I know, I have someone's arms wrapped around my neck. I'm dragged down to the floor. I cannot breathe. For like 2 minutes, some other guy's kicking me in the head.
They kicked my head so many times that when I finally broke free, blood was running out of my ears.
Look at me, look at my ear. Okay, it's blood coming out of my ear. I got kicked like 16 times in the fucking head. There's a fat fucking who strangled my neck. I can't bend it either way.
I remember, as I was pinned to the floor, my vision going gray and thinking, this is it. I'm gonna die. Then it was like something else entered my body, and I managed to break an arm free and land a blow in that fucker holding my neck's nose, and suddenly,
I was a wild,
ready to kill if I hadn't been pulled outside.
I didn't do anything. I'm trying to be a better person. This is my 17th birthday. That's what happens, and no one cares. It's like a big joke. It's a big amusement.
For anyone thinking that I'm just being a fucking huge bitch in this video and being a big baby and that, it wasn't that big of a deal to be in a fight, this was more than just a fight. That kind of sudden, out of the blue assault, that could give anybody PTSD. But what you're seeing in this video is the accumulation of adversity sort of mounting and stacking up, and then after this incident, boiling over the surface. This kind of despair is the kind of emotional distress that leads to doing stupid, crazy shit. And, people who continue to get picked on, called a pussy, called a snowflake, a bitch, for feeling these kind of things, it just turns those emotions into rage, and it clouds the judgment of somebody, to the point of hurting themselves or hurting others.
Bad. I didn't think things would be like this. I'm not good at school. I'm always getting in trouble. My parents think I'm a failure. I'm a disappointment. I feel like I can't do anything right at all. Fucking this shit's kicked out of me and there's no one I can talk to.
Maybe recording this state of crisis was my way of trying to capture proof to myself that I needed help. The feelings and the emotion I'm demonstrating kind of presents itself as sort of a borderline episode. I'm saying things that, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me. That's just simply not true. My mother loved me very much, and I knew that I had some very close friends who cared about me deeply. But in that moment of despair, all of that goes out the window. When you become possessed with that sort of hopelessness and rage and sorrow, all the grounding of knowing that you are loved, that you are cared for, that you are important, that, there are reasons to hold on, hope for your future, all those things seem to just sort of dissipate in that moment. And that's not the first time I felt that way or had an episode like that. I think those episodes started as early as late elementary school, certainly by middle school. And by the time I was 16, they would sort of sneak up on me here and there out of the blue. Who knows what would happen? A breakup with a girlfriend, a fight with a, teacher, or my stepdad, or who knows what might trigger it. But that feeling would just seem to bubble up out of nowhere and be really inflated for the injury that I was facing, and it would feel hopeless. I would feel so alone, and that's not the case. So why would I get so possessed with that feeling? It would lead to suicidal ideation, slapping myself, cutting myself, burning myself. What was coming into me that would make me feel like just giving up? Feeling cursed, feeling that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to be worthy in the eyes of my teachers, in the eyes of future employers, my parents, my friends, myself. And that kind of despair is not normal teen angst. That comes from repeated adversity, repeated getting yourself up, dusting yourself off, and moving forward, only to be knocked down again. You know, most of the time I was, a pretty strong kid. I had been through a lot more than what most people would know about. And, I was doing the best I could coping with that, because it was all I knew, right? When adversity is the landscape you live in, that's the world you're used to living in. And you do tend to get pretty strong. I was a strong kid, but in that moment after the assault, it had sort of broken down my barriers, and everything I was feeling was this stacking, mounting anxiety and hopelessness that I had been pushing down for several years. And in that moment, it was all bubbling to the surface.
Instead of feeling like a victim, I had never felt so ashamed. My mother was always loving and supportive. Yet, despite her years of effort, here I was, fucking it all up. She had to drag me out of there to go to the ER, and I hated that. Once again, here I was, the root of crisis and fear. The doctor said it was a goddamn miracle my skull didn't crack open, and after the CT scan, he recommended follow-ups to investigate the possibility of a traumatic brain injury.
Something's injured in my head, like I'm not stupid enough already. Something in my head is injured more now. It's bleeding in my head.
But I begged my mom. I insisted, refused to be scrutinized further. I already felt so fucking broken, so stupid and twisted and different and scared that I didn't even want to know if there was something more wrong with me. I'd rather live in denial than admit I needed help. And that's a fact, Jack.
Head hurts, it's swelling, sucks. Doesn't look as bad today, but it still hurts like a bitch. Goes all the way up here. But, I'm still alive. I went to the emergency room, and they thought I fractured my skull, but it was just swelling, and I'll be okay. Life goes on.
Now, this video was the very next day after the assault. All that anger and distress diminished beneath some false persona, some alter ego I must have thought was cool, and hid behind to mask the scared and desperate kid hiding beneath. 24 hours later, I'm like an entirely different person.
I feel violated. I feel like something inside me has died. Like humanity, like pity, I don't know. I feel like if I ever get in a situation like that again, I'm just gonna totally go insane, but and hurt someone. I'll be alright. What is there to live for? I don't know.
I started going through all this media, to make these videos, to promote my novel and to start a conversation. And I discovered some of these, clips and tapes and stuff that I had totally forgotten, and it had just been, shoved in a shoebox within a tote. And finding these clips is disturbing in a way, but also sort of awe-inspiring to realize I was talking about ACEs before I even knew what ACEs were. Adverse childhood experiences before the CDC Kaiser study was even released yet, because that was being done when I was in high school around the same time.
People feel bad about themselves and eventually are like, all I am is a punkish, troublemaking bastard anyway. Why should I try to stop my nature?
These misunderstood teens are generally pretty smart. They just have no confidence in themselves and normally give up their will to succeed.
Some teens will turn to drugs, will turn to violence. If a teen never faces their problem, they'll detach themselves. Some might commit suicide, but most won't, especially the ones that already feel like no one cares about them. They often think, if I die, nobody will remember me, no one will care. Often a teen in this situation will fantasize about hurting others, the people he hates. Now, this is an extreme example. I mean, most teens wouldn't actually go through with it, but sometimes one feels so pushed over the line that they'll be driven madly into doing something like that. They feel like life's not worth living, and if I'm gonna die anyway, I might as well take some of these bastards with me.
When writing this particular part of my story, it takes place in childhood, and it's very much a coming-of-age story. And over the years, I had to strip back my ego to really look at the struggles I was having, but still try to really maintain where my mind was when I was, 10 years old, when I was 12 years old, 14 years old, and that includes all the insecurities and all the anger that I was masking. That's a big thing that, I think it's important to talk about when talking about complex post-traumatic stress disorder is masking. And that means, sort of putting on a persona to cover up what you're really going through, internally, in front of other people. And we all do that, right? To a certain extent, those of us in school, right? When you go, amongst your peers, or, when you're, maybe some of us when we're going to work, we kind of put on a certain professional persona. We don't show everybody all of our quirks or, all of our dark humor or whatever it is, our anger, our, we try to put our best foot forward, most of us. Some of us maybe cover up our pain by doing the opposite and being sort of antisocial and pretending we don't give a shit. That's really common too, but that's all masking, right? That's all a way of kind of hiding what's going on in your internal struggle from the people around you. And quite often, I think in my experience, from myself. And, that's something I think called cognitive dissonance. And there are certain instances in my life where I had these sort of sort of eye-opening moments of clarity where I realized that I had some cognitive amnesia, some dissociative amnesia, where I had completely blocked out certain things about my childhood, to protect that narrative, that early narrative. And so it's, over the years, I think in a weird way, I was doing my own art therapy without guidance by finding an outlet in writing these stories. I think that was a really powerful source of relief when I was overwhelmed and potentially symptomatic with complex PTSD. That in combination of seeking some professional counseling, having done the work by writing to make some, internal discoveries before that process, but then, having someone to talk about those things with and, be asked questions about and kind of given a window into some clinical perspective that I could research on my own and then reflect on that narrative again, go back through it and, whittle it away and get closer and closer, I think, to that genuine voice of that hurt child who wanted to tell that story. Without all the masking with or as much masking, to the raw nitty gritty of that angry, lost child. The voice that I tapped into for the Midnight Sun novel, I think that, that mask that I carried, that monster Jack, that embodiment of the anger, I think that was part of that mask that sort of started to get created over the years. And that, meaning the voice I tapped into to connect with those feelings from those times in my life, that's a real voice of the mask, of the false self that I sort of allowed to infiltrate my teenhood and complicated my life in just a matter of years, creating lifelong struggles as an adult. That's interesting to me. The story's about spirits, and one of the spirits, I guess, is that sort of psychological entity that's created in the mind that That's not just a figment of the imagination, that is part of your persona that sometimes you put on in certain situations, and if you're not aware of it, it can really wreak havoc on your life, and you pay for it. You pay for those consequences sometimes in very real ways. And just like a monster, if you are in denial of that sort of false self, that mask that you might wear, that the control it's going to have over you and the anxiety it's going to inflict on you, and all those things are going to get worse. They say that there are stages to a haunting, and one of them is oppression. And, nothing's more oppressive than when you are just pushing down your troubles and allowing some sort of false self to, take over for you and run amok in your life. Another thing that might kind of relate to cognitive dissonance is magical thinking. Sort of the story you tell yourself despite maybe the facts that are presented in reality to you and everyone around you. An example of that might be, someone who just, thinks they can never find their keys because fairies are magically moving them around the house. Or maybe somebody who kind of adds up their distress and confusion to ghosts haunting their home, right? So, when it comes to my haunting, and, the idea of maybe it was magical thinking, maybe it was sort of a way of masking my despair and projecting it onto some other sort of external idea of danger. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe that fed into the feelings of not being alone and being watched and feeling anxious. Maybe even, some subtle visual hallucinations like seeing shadows move from the corner of your eyes. All that could be contributed to something like PTSD or anxiety disorders, different things, I'm sure. But then, there are other factors to the haunting that are harder to let go of and explain away. When it really got scary was around the time I made these recordings. All of a sudden, there were things like my dog would just start growling and barking and clearly tracking something that no one else could see, but he was sure was a threat. That was pretty anxiety provoking. And then the banging on the walls, like someone going around the room, punching the wall after wall.
Oh shit! Fuck!
Loud noises. I was really convinced there was another presence in that house. Something scary. And other people heard it.
Shared experiences with friends who, frequented my house and would stay over. Terrifying, just terrifying, and hard to explain away. My family was cursed. We were haunted. There was something we didn't understand following us around. It was scary when I was a kid going through that stuff, and my mom would tell me, it's only bad dreams, ghosts aren't real.
All right, honey, you're fine.
That stuff can't hurt you. But it was terrifying when I got older, and I came to realize my mom really, was pretty scared too.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Fiction is rooted in something real.
Is that you?
Horror, fantasy, sci-fi, all of it.
Hello?
But I didn't want to tell Levi because I didn't want to scare him.
Just remember, sweetie.
She didn't tell me about any of that until I was much older, and so it didn't influence those perceptions when I was a little kid from her. And as far as my dad and his belief in demons and the things he told me about why I was experiencing this, I didn't talk to him until I was a preteen and had been experiencing these symptoms for years. Both my parents, I'd come to find out, were absolutely terrified of the presence that was in the house from the time they moved in.
Yeah, there was something kind of odd in that house from the time we moved in.
Whatever it is, if there's ever been any demon activity in your history of your genealogy, you're at risk.
to anyone who has been tormented in a haunted house, you know how isolating and terrifying and oppressive those experiences can be, especially when no one will believe you. While I maybe had some issues going on, I was certainly, sane enough to know how crazy it sounded to most people if you told them about what we were experiencing. And, no one wants to be, judged that way or have their family judged that way. And nobody wants to be told, that the distress you've been feeling for years isn't real. It isn't legitimate. Going to film festivals, sharing some of the short films that are based off of this writing, I've certainly connected to lots of people who, once you open up and say, oh yeah, this is based on a real ghost story, they were like, oh my God, let me tell you mine. And there's something powerful in that connection and and knowing you're not alone. I hope there are some young people who, maybe find some solace in knowing that some of the darkness they face from the mask they put on is totally normal, that it is okay to talk about, it is okay to ask for help sorting out those feelings, and they're not alone with that.